Carpenter presiding.
Thank you, everyone. Please be seated.
They should be on their way in.
All right, no worries. Do you guys have the eye in on that computer or no? It's very handy because sometimes you can see where everybody's at. You've used it before. You have it.
I have.
Okay. Well, because the symbol is an eye.
Okay.
It's called, yeah, Avigilon, Aveigilon. She's coming in now. Calling the case of the People State of Michigan versus Kimberly Joe Sanborn, file 21-0661FD. You can, counsel, please identify yourselves for the record.
Thank you, Patrick Stravinsky, for the people.
You can be here at the chairs.
Thank you, Judge. Kimberly King Gower Law on behalf of Ms. Sanborn, who's in the courtroom and seated to my left.
So it's my understanding that this is the time and date set for preliminary examination, but the parties have reached an agreement for waiver of the preliminary examination for ongoing discussions, and that if there was a stipulation that the case could be remanded to district court if it's necessary. Is that correct, Mr. Schwinski?
That's correct, Your Honor. We have ongoing plea negotiations. I believe we'll come to some type of misdemeanor disposition at this point, so I have no objection to the waiver with the condition.
Ms. King, is your client familiar? May I ask her if she's familiar with the preliminary examination is and her consent?
Absolutely, Judge.
Okay. Ms. Sanborn, your attorney is recommending for now that you waive the preliminary examination so that the case goes to circuit court. You're not admitting to anything other than just acknowledging you're wishing to waive the preliminary examination. This is a full, complete waiver, meaning that the case is transferring up to Judge Beal or Judge Karras. It may come back, but that depends on what the attorneys do. Do you understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
You have to speak a little louder because we're recording.
Yes, Your Honor.
And you understand what a preliminary examination is?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to make this, and Ms. King, your recommendation is for her to waive today. Is that true?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay, I'm going to make the determination then that the waiver has been made knowingly, understandingly, and voluntarily. The matter is bound over to circuit court. There is a step that we do that eliminates a 2-week time gap, and it also saves some time in court. And that is doing the circuit court arraignment. So at this point, Ms. King, is it all right for me to do the circuit court arraignment?
It is, Your Honor.
Do you need me to read the charges? I do see that the information has already been filed. Do you need me to read the charges, or is your client familiar with the charges and the maximum penalty?
We're familiar and we waive one more reading.
And how do you plead your client in circuit court?
Not guilty.
Not guilty plea will be entered in the records of the court. This matter is adjourned here. The next notification will come from either Judge Beal or Judge Karras. I don't know which judge you will get appointed to, and then ongoing negotiations. It may end up back here, but as it stands right now, it's a circuit court case and not a district court case. case. Anything else we need to place on the record, Mr. Swinski?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Anything else, Ms. King?
No, no,
All right, we'll be adjourned. Thank you.
thank you, Judge.
Thank you. That goes back to Teresa.
Actually, Judge, before, one other thing. I don't know if you want to go back on the record.
I think we're still on.
Okay, perfect. Ms. Sanborn was scheduled to go on vacation. When
Okay.
when we were arraigned on this matter, the magistrate gave her permission to leave. We're just verifying that she still has permission to leave.
She does. She may want to have a piece of paper from have it from my circuit court probation, just in case, for some reason, if she gets stopped for a traffic ticket or something else and they run her name, she want to probably have that piece of paper. So I would allow her to go. My probation department is where she would get that information from.
Perfect.
If you can walk her over there?
Yep.
Thank you. We'll be adjourned.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Judge, do you want to go ahead and do the jail arraignments now?
Yes.
Okay.
We're just doing 3, correct, Teresa?
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, thanks. Yes, just 3, Judge.
All right, they're all Bs. Mr. Housesteal is not a B. Mr. Housesteal, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Judge.
Looks like the paperwork is still needing to be completed on one of the defendants. So the paperwork we have is for Benchley, Benmark, and Brewski.
Okay, yes. Okay. And I understand then Mr. Donnelly will probably be tomorrow or,
Probably tomorrow. They said that they were running a little behind and weren't able to get to that today. You had an opportunity to talk with everyone, so they're ready to proceed.
we are ready to proceed. I have talked with each of them.
Okay. Thank you for that. Teresa, did we already request the inmates?
I did, Your Honor.
Okay.
Judge,
Yes.
I had Sarah send the jury instructions to Teresa, so you know.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead and have a seat in the brown chair.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Are you Miss Benmark?
Yes,
All right. Calling the case of the people of the state of Michigan versus Dawn Marie Benmark, file 20-1390FY. Counsel, identify yourself for the record. I don't
Oh,
see a
me?
prosecutor. No, you're fine. This is Mr. Housey. I don't see a prosecutor that was assigned to.
Okay, are we still waiting on a prosecutor? So,
I think we'll check. Teresa, can we give a shout out to the prosecutor's office, see who was assigned to it? I think we've got 2/7 of the
Sure.
attorney staff here in the courtroom, so
Okay, I'll check that out.
that's 3/7.
Mr. Reddick.
Okay. I think we'll start, and then when Mr. Reddick gets involved here, we'll get input from the prosecutor's office regarding the bond issue. So, Ms. Benmark, well, Mr. Alseal is here just today to help you through this part of the case. If you want a lawyer after today's date, you either have to hire a lawyer or request a court-appointed attorney. Do you understand that?
yes,
Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you the charge or charges and the maximum penalties, and then I'm going to ask if you understand them. And then after that, I'll ask Mr. Housey a few questions. Then we're going to talk about bond, and we're going to talk about an attorney for you. Do you understand?
yes.
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to share with you a copy of the document on the computer screen. Let me know when it pops up there. It should be there right about now.
Yes, yes,
In this case, ma'am, you're charged with one crime, but as habitual offender fourth. And I'm going to start with the habitual offender because it has an impact on what the maximum penalty for this charge is. So here, the prosecutor's office is alleged that you have at least 3 prior felony convictions. One of the felony convictions was from June 4th, 2012 of attempted controlled substance manufacture in Gladwin. One on April 2nd of 2013 of delivering or manufacturing controlled substances in Gladwin County. And on December 22nd, 2014 of controlled substance in Gladwin County. And on March 9th, 2015 of an accessory after the fact, and that also was in Gladwin. So this, if you're convicted, was at least your 4th felony. You're charged here in Midland County because of allegations stemming from an event the prosecutor is alleged on October 2nd of 2020, last year, that you did on an address on M18 knowingly or intentionally possess less than 25 grams of a mixture containing the controlled substance heroin. Typically, if you were charged just with that, it's a felony punishable by up to 4 years in prison and or $25,000 in fines plus court costs. And unless you were sentenced to more than 1 year in prison, the sentencing court would have to impose driver's license sanctions that are outlined in the Health Code 333.7408A. They have chosen, however, to charge you two different ways of being an habitual offender. The way I told you about just a minute ago with the habitual offender fourth, what that does is that makes this up to a 15 years in prison if you're convicted as this with habitual offender fourth, and or $25,000 in fines plus court costs. But they've also charged you with being a person charged with 2 or more felony drug crimes. So here they're alleging that you were convicted of other drug type crimes on April 2nd, 2013 in Gladwin County. And what that does, instead of this one being 4 by itself or up to 15 with the habitual, if they went this route, it doubles both the maximum penalty and the fine. So if you're convicted as a second offense, a controlled substance, you would be up to 8 years in prison and or $50,000 in fines plus court costs. So it's one charge with 2 different ways to increase it. Do you understand the charge and the maximum penalties that I've just read?
Yes.
Mr. Halseal, how do you advise your client that she should plead?
Ms. Benmark pleads not guilty and requests a court-appointed attorney.
Okay. Teresa, do we have the dates for Ms. Benmark?
Yes, Your Honor. July 27th at 1 o'clock for the PCC and August 3rd at 3:30 for the prelim.
Okay, those are the next 2 times in court. Ms. Benmark, Mr. Halseal has said that you are requesting a court-appointed attorney. Is that true?
Yes, at this time, yes.
Okay, so this is a form that I have to fill out to determine, oh, I need to share it so you can see it. This form outlines some questions I have to ask you to determine if you qualify financially for a court-appointed attorney. The address we have for you is 4266 Turtle Lake Road, Gaylord, Michigan. Is that a valid address?
No, it's not.
What is a valid address for you?
9311 Old Highway 27, South, Apartment 12.
Old Highway 27?
Yep, Old Highway 27, South, Apartment 12.
What town is
Yeah.
that in?
Gaylord, Michigan,
And the zip code?
49735.
Is that a place you're renting, buying, or are you living with someone else up there who is owning it or renting it?
I'm renting it.
How much do you pay in rent for that place?
$750 a month.
Are you, look in the marital status box, are you single, married, divorced, or separated?
Divorce?
Do you have any minor children?
No.
Are you currently working?
Yes.
Where do you work?
American Alpine Lodge.
What do you do for them?
I'm the front desk clerk.
How much do you make per hour?
I make $11.50 an hour,
How many hours a week are you working?
40 plus.
Do you receive any type of assistance such as food stamps, Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security disability?
I received food stamps and insurance.
All right, since you qualify for those state programs, I'm going to go ahead and appoint an attorney for you.
Okay.
Now we have to talk about bond. So, Mr. Halseal, would you like to make a comment regarding bond?
I believe, well, Ms. Benmark does have some background. It's clearly, all related to substance issues. She is not a flight risk. She appears in court when she's supposed to appear in court. She presents no danger to the community or to the safety of people in the public. So I would request that the court take that into consideration when setting bond for Ms. Benmark and with appropriate conditions, perhaps related to the substance issues involved here. Also noting that this case, this charge is from October of 2020. And so some months ago. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Reddick, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Would you like to make a comment regarding bond?
Your Honor, we just would ask that you would fashion an appropriate bond. Looks like the last problems with the law that Ms. Benmark had was in 2015, at least from what I'm seeing here, felony-wise. So we just ask that you would fashion an appropriate bond to assure her appearance.
All right, Ms. Benmark, are you still on parole? You were on parole until June 12th of 2021.
No, I successfully completed my parole.
Did you clear up the warrant out of Gladwin for dangerous drug charges?
That was just for not paying my fine. That's been cleared up today, yes.
Okay. All right. So Court Rule 6106F1 says I can look at your prior criminal history. I can look at your current charges and the seriousness of them. I show that your criminal record is this, that in 2010, nothing until 2010, that was a driving while license suspended. Then somehow you got involved in the drug scene. In June 4th of 2012, you had a delivery manufacturer schedule 1, 2, or 3. That was out of Gladwin, that felony. And then April of 2013, same charge out of Gladwin. And December 22nd, 2014, you went to prison for the same charges. Yes. And in 2015, felony after the fact, you went to prison. You were on parole at the time that you allegedly committed this offense because you were discharged from parole June 12th of 2021, but you had this offense in the interim. You're currently charged with a crime that carries with it potentially up to 8 years or up to 15 years in prison. It's a controlled substance charge again as well. Although it's been from 2020, I'm not certain where you have been during that time period. Miss Rebecca Holm, that's right. Miss Rebecca Holm did an assessment. She had suggested a release with supervision. I am going to follow that. You will be released, but it will be a $25,000 10% bond. You are not to use any alcohol. You are not to use any illicitly used controlled substances. You are to participate in a substance abuse testing or monitoring program. You're to continue to seek or maintain your employment, and you're to have intermediate supervision. That you have at least 2 contacts per month and a court reminder notification. If you are unable to make the bond that I just set, then you're in jail. You're to participate in a PA 511 Women's Seeking Safety Group. If you are able to make that bond, then it is recommended, and I will order that you continue treatment with your medication-assisted treatment provider and drug testing when it is required of them. I don't see that there's asking for any assessment, but I am going to order that you get a drug and alcohol assessment done either in Gaylord, or if you're unable to find one, it can be done here in Midland. You can use that by Zoom. So
I do know that I'm sorry, go ahead. Every month I get a shot. I get a boxing shot, and I got to go through counseling, and they drug test me every month for that. So is that the assessment you want done?
Well, the assessment would be someone talking with you to see if you still have a drug problem, but it sounds like you're working with some people. So as long as you talk with Mr. Rebecca Holmes and she's satisfied with that, that would satisfy the court. So the next time go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So the next time will be July 27th at 1 o'clock. If you make bond, we're going to need to have a telephone number that you can Zoom in, because that will be by Zoom and like electronic like this. If you do the preliminary examination on August 3rd, that will be in person. You'll have to be here. So is there a telephone number and email that we can use?
Yes. 350-4756.
Okay.
And then Dawn Benmark 2019@gmail.com.
Okay. All right. So you'll need to use your phone if you make the bond to Zoom in on July 27th at 1 o'clock. If you're unable to make the bond, I will listen to a bond reduction request by the defense attorney on that date, but I think that it's an appropriate bond based upon the fact that you were on parole at the time that you allegedly committed this offense. It sounds like you're doing better than we just caught up with you on this case. So
Yeah.
I'm willing to take that into consideration, but I'd like to know a little bit more. All right, we'll be adjourned on your case at this time. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
10%. Folks, are you here for a specific case?
That's Mr. Maxey.
Oh, Mr. Maxey? Okay, we'll deal with that in just a minute, okay? All right, good afternoon, sir. Could you please tell me your name?
William Benchley.
All right. Thank you. We are on the record. The case of the People's State of Michigan versus William Benchley, file 21-0788SM. Counsel, identify yourselves for the record.
Jeffrey Reddick on behalf of the people.
Stephen Halsey on behalf of Mr. Benchley for the limited purpose of this proceeding.
All right. Today's time and date set for this arraignment. Sir, I want to read to you the charge or charges that have been filed against you. After that, I will ask Mr. Halsey to enter a plea for you. So let me make sure I understand this correctly. Sorry, I'm looking at another note from Ms. Hoffman, who has you on pretrial services. So I just want to make sure I've cut up the date. This is a conditional bond violation, it looks like. Mr. Reddick, as well as Mr. Halsey, says this. Ms. Hoffman indicates she's the person that's in charge of Mr. Benchley's pretrial services. She says the defendant is in a bond violation. He's on her pretrial services caseload for domestic violence. According to Ms. it sounds like the son or stepson came to his house to stay for a few days. The defendant has been cooperative with pretrial services, completed an assessment at Answers Counseling, has been participating as far as she knows. She emailed today to confirm compliance, and that unless there was something specific regarding this, she would request continuing on with the bond. However, Mr. Reddick, is there? I'm not certain how Mr. Benchley ended up in jail, unless there was another call out to police.
Yeah, well, what I can advise the court is I'm familiar with that there was a unrelated criminal investigation that was undertaken. He was found to be, that being Mr. Benchley, during that investigation was found to be in the presence of Mr. Donnelly, who I believe is his son, and is also the victim in the pending matter. The term and condition was obviously he's not to have any contact with Mr. Donnelly. Mr. Donnelly, I believe, is currently being held in the Midland County Jail as well. I don't expect that there will be any further contact between Mr. Benchley and Mr. Donnelly. I think that Mr. Donnelly had nowhere else to go when he went home, which is to where his father was. Mr. Benchley was cooperative with the police, admitted that he knew it was in violation of his bond, but that his son had been there for approximately 2 days. He didn't try and hide it. So there was no artifice or any fraud. I think it was just a matter of his son returned home or spending time there. And it came up in an investigation, and that they was found the son was arrested, and as was Mr. Benchley.
Okay, so the son is facing unrelated charges to this case.
Correct.
Okay, all right. So, Mr. Alcio, may I address your client then regarding the conditions of the bond?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Benchley, Mr. Reddick says that this wasn't a new call. It wasn't a new. Sometimes what happens in domestic violence cases is that victims and the defendants get back together. Most of the time, it's boyfriend, girlfriend, or husband and wife, or you know, that type of relationship, as opposed to father and son. In this case, the police could not ignore, once they ran your name, that there was an order saying keep away. I understand that if your son had no place to go, that you took him in, but it's still a violation of my order. I suspect, just like you do when you were raising your son, and just like you do, you would expect that if you said something that it would be followed. And so the police did the right thing by arresting you. That order is still in place. So until we get that case resolved, I need to make sure you understand that you will be arrested if you have contact with your son. It's not going to be forever, but it's got to be for right now. Sounds like your son has some bigger issues he's got to deal with anyway.
Yeah, apparently.
Okay. So I'm going to, unless Mr. Reddick, there's another issue, I'm going to reinstate the bond, let Mr. Benchley go. I just want to make sure he understands the significance of the bond terms.
Sure, I have no objection to that, Your Honor. I believe that's appropriate.
All right. So Mr. Benchley, your son is probably going to be a little bit scared, nervous, and try to make contact with you. I don't have any orders of him reaching out to you, but you can't talk to him. And so you know now that the police, if they find that you're violating the order, they will arrest you. And if you do it a second time, you're telling me that I got to hold you in jail in order to not have contact with your son, although you'd be physically closer because he's in the building. But no contact means no contact. You understand?
Yeah, I do. I do.
Okay. All right. I'm
I
going
tried
to
to tell him
really.
he could be with me, but
I understand. Life is complicated. All right. You're going to be re-released. The same bond terms apply. We'll see you on the 27th. Okay. He can be released. Thank you.
thank you, sir.
So not guilty and then reestablished bond.
Back down where you were and here in a little bit.
Mr. Brewski, correct?
Seated in the brown chair in there.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you tell me your name, please?
My name is Michael Brusky.
Calling the case of the people of the state of Michigan versus Michael William Brewski, file 210982FY. Would the attorneys please identify themselves for the record?
Jeffrey Reddick on behalf of the people.
Stephen Halsey on behalf of Mr. Brewski for the limited purpose of his arraignment.
Mr. Brewski, Mr.
Mr.
Halsey.
Brusky, sir.
Brusky, Mr. Brusky. Mr.
Yes, sir.
Halsey is here only today just to help you through this. If you wish to have a lawyer after today's date, you have to hire a lawyer or request a court-appointed attorney. Do you understand that?
Yes.
I'm going to show you a copy of the charges against you. When you see them on the computer screen, if you would please let me know. I think they should be there right about now.
Yes.
In this case, sir, you are charged with, let's see how many, 5 criminal counts. The allegations stem from an incident that is alleged to have occurred on July 12th of 2021 on Isabella Street, also known as M20 in the city and county of Midland. Count 1, you're charged with carrying a carrying concealed weapon. It is alleged on this same date, time, and place that you did carry a dangerous weapon, which was a knife, whether concealed or otherwise, in a vehicle occupied or operated by the defendant, which was a Chevy Impala. If you're convicted of this crime, it's a felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison or $2,500 in fines plus court costs, mandatory forfeiture of the weapon or the device. Count 2, you're charged with resist, obstruct a police officer. It is alleged in the same date, time, and place you did assault, batter, wound, resist, obstruct, oppose, or endanger Officer DeFrancisco, and a police officer from the Midland Police Department that the defendant knew or had reason to know was performing his duties. If you're convicted of this crime, it is a felony punishable by up to 2 years in prison and or $2,000 in fines plus court costs. Consecutive sentencing, meaning this one consecutive to the other ones, could be imposed if the assault took place in a place of confinement or for another violation arising out of the same transaction. Count 3 is another charge for resist, obstruct a police officer. It is alleged in the same date, time, and place that you did assault, batter, wound, resist, obstruct, oppose, or or endanger Sergeant Davis, police officer for the Midland Police Department, and that you knew or had reason to know was performing his duties. Again, that is also a felony punishable by up to 2 years in prison and or $2,000 in fines plus court costs. Consecutive sentencing may be imposed if it was in a place of confinement or for another violation arising out of the same transaction or occurrence. Count 4, you're charged with operating while intoxicated. It is alleged in the same date, time, and place that you did operate a vehicle on the highway Isabella Street while under the influence of a controlled substance and or under the influence of marijuana, an intoxicating substance. If you're convicted of that crime, it's a misdemeanor punishable by up to 93 days in jail and a fine between $100 and $500 and or 360 hours community service. You could be ordered to do rehabilitative programs. Vehicle immobilization may be mandatory depending on your driving record. You may have to pay for the cost of prosecuting you or reimburse the government for any emergency response vehicles or costs associated with the arrest or incident. Count 5, you're charged with operating with the presence of a controlled substance. It is alleged in the same day, time, and place that you did operate a motor vehicle on the highway Isabella Street and you had marijuana in your body. That is a misdemeanor. If convicted, it's punishable by up to 93 days in jail, a fine between $100 and $500 and or 360 hours community service, rehabilitative programs. Vehicle immobilization is possible, as well as having you have to pay for the cost of prosecuting you. Do you understand the charges and the maximum penalties that I've just read?
Yes.
Mr. Halseal, how do you advise your client to plead?
Mr. Brusky enters a plea of not guilty and requests a court-appointed attorney.
All right, Mr. Brusky, ask you a few questions about your financial situation to make a determination as to whether or not you qualify. I'm going to show you that document so you can see where I'm getting the questions from. The address that we have for you is 596 South Homer Road. Is that a valid address?
No.
What is a valid address?
593 Homedale Street.
Could you spell that for me, please?
HOMEDALE Street.
Tyler?
Saginaw, Michigan.
What's the zip code there?
48642.
Do you have a telephone number that your attorney could reach you at?
Yes. 989-297-5213.
All right. Couple of questions we have to ask about your that place you're living in, Saginaw. Is the place you're renting? Are you buying it, or are you living with someone else?
I am renting.
How much do you pay in rent?
$650 a month.
Are you single, married, divorced, or separated?
I am single.
Do you have any minor children?
No, sir.
Are you working?
Yes.
What do you do?
I am a delivery driver.
Who do you drive for?
Hungry Howie's.
How much do you make?
I make $7.50 on the road and $12 in the store.
Okay. How much do you think you make and what's an average week for you, or 2 weeks? Ballpark. It doesn't have to be perfect.
About, I couldn't tell you. With being a tipped employee, it ranges from $400 to $800.
A week or 2 weeks?
Every 2 weeks, and hours on the schedule.
I'm going to say about 200 every 2 weeks. Do you receive any assistance such as food, Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security disability?
I wouldn't say 200 personally, but no, I do not receive EBT. I do not receive food stamps.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and appoint an attorney for you. Need to address the issue of bond. Mr. Halseal?
My understanding is that Mr. Brusky has one event in his past, an MIP from a few years ago. Other than that, no involvement with law enforcement or the judicial system. See anything here that would indicate that he would be a flight risk. Also note on the charges, it's being the first time I've seen the charging document, that the first charge, the felony charge of carrying a concealed weapon, relates specifically to a knife. And a knife has, unlike a firearm, has some very specific elements regarding that knife. In most instances, possessing a knife is not a violation of the law. And I don't see here in the initial charging document the required elements which would make carrying a knife illegal. So I just point that out. Other than that, understanding the seriousness of the R&O charge against Mr. Brusky, again, this is his first encounter with law enforcement. Certainly appears that substances were a factor, and I asked the court to take those things into account when setting bond. Nothing further.
Thank you. Mr. Reddick, any comment regarding bond?
And I think the nature of these charges would necessarily require that the court would use some sort of cash or surety consideration in this matter. I do acknowledge he has no prior history other than the MIP, but something out of the ordinary obviously happened in Mr. Brusky's life last night. And the nature of it would be, if he's acting out of character, maybe we need to get to the bottom of it. And that would be something that could possibly be taken into account with pretrial services, which is something I think is appropriate in this situation. So we'd ask for some type of surety type bond, as well as appropriate pretrial services to monitor Mr. Brusky during the pendency of the case.
All right. Court Rule 6106F1 says that take into consideration a defendant's prior criminal history, which is only the MIP. Also, the seriousness of the charge, it's a 5-year felony, in addition to 2 resist obstruct police officer, which 2-year felonies, 5 total charges that have been set. Miss Rebecca Holm met with the defendant. She ran him through the praxis scoring. An objective praxis scoring says the defendant should be released with a cash or surety bond, intermediate pretrial supervision. Concerns were that there was a felony conviction, that the defendant lived in his residence for less than 1 year, and he has a history of substance abuse, and he has a prior conviction. So those praxis determinations, and there's a defendant has a significant mental health concern. So the recommendations from Ms. Rebecca Holm, based on those, was that there would be a cash surety bond. I will set it at a $25,000, 10% bond. That the defendant, if he is able to make bond, he is to have 2 contacts per month is ordered to do pretrial services. He is to get a biopsychosocial assessment done at J&A Counseling Services, follow all the treatment recommendations. He is not to consume alcoholic beverages or recreational marijuana or illegal drugs. He is subject to random drug and alcohol testing. He is also, if he is unable to make the bond, he is to engage in the PA 511 men's cognitive behavioral group classes. He is not to possess any dangerous weapons in the interim because of the allegations of being in possession. And though Mr. Halstead is right, there are other elements that you have to have in order to be guilty of carrying a concealed weapon, particularly when it's a knife. There are some concerns that he was doing that while he was intoxicated under some substances. So I am going to order that he not possess any dangerous weapons, whether he's licensed to do that or not. Their probable cause conference and preliminary examination, did we get those set already, Teresa?
Your Honor, the PCC will be July 27th at 1 and the exam August 3rd at 3:45.
Okay, those are the next court dates. Sir, Mr. Brusky, the probable cause conference on July 27th is going to be by Zoom, so you'll need to Zoom in if you're not in jail. And then the preliminary examination on August 3rd will be live in person if we have it on that date. Anything else we need to place on the record, Mr. Reddick?
No, nothing for the people. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Halstead?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right. We'll be
Your
adjourned on
Honor. Can we
Yes.
verify the zip code for his address? I believe the one he gave was for Midland, not Saginaw.
Okay. Do you remember the zip code again, sir?
48642.
That's a Midland, that is a Midland zip code. You sure about that?
Is it?
It is.
48642? That is a Saginaw zip code.
48640 and 48642 are both Midland zip codes. You may have grown up in Midland and got used to that zip code, but we're probably going to have a different zip code for your address. If you can find it out when you get out and let us know, we'd appreciate it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. We'll be adjourned.
You're all set.
All right.
You're
We're
all
all
set.
set.
You can come on back up.
Calling the case of the people of the state of Michigan versus Joseph Emery Maxey. This is file 21-0358FY. Go ahead and have a seat, one of these two chairs here, sir. Counsel, please identify yourself for the record.
Joseph Emery, on behalf of the people, Your Honor.
Your Honor, Leland Burton for Mr. Duke, for Mr. Max, who's standing to my left.
Can I address the representation, Mr. Burton?
Yes.
Mr. Maxey, good afternoon, sir. You have a soft voice, so you're gonna need, if you can speak up, the microphone's right in front of you there, so make sure that we can pick you up.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Duke is not able to be here today, but Mr. Burton is here and is wishing to help you, assist you today for today's purposes. Do you consent to his representation today?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Amon?
Your Honor, I think we have a difficulty with this though, because Mr. Burton represents one of the co-defendants in this matter, and there's agreements for testimony against each other and things of that nature.
Okay.
I spoke with Mr. Duke before he went on vacation, and Mr. Burton wasn't kind of figuring this out today, that there's this problem. So I think we need Mr. Duke to talk with Mr. Maxey by himself,
So you just
without
said-
Mr. Burton representing Mr. Maxey, because he represents a co-defendant.
Okay, so conflict of interest.
Yes, Your Honor.
So you're asking for maybe another week adjournment then?
Yeah, yes, Your Honor.
Should we set it for a probable cause conference to have is there another case that's unrelated to this that could potentially, another criminal case, or is this a neglect and abuse type case?
No, there's two co-defendants in this matter, Your Honor, and they're both in circuit court right now.
Okay,
And but like I said, based on the, what the plea offer is, each one of them
It
needs
causes
their
the
own
problem.
attorney. Yep.
you would agree with that, Mr. Burton?
I do.
Mr. Maxey, we have a fairly small community, so we don't have that many court-appointed attorneys. We have other ones that we can reach out to on a certain occasion. Most of the time, when an attorney takes a vacation, we try not to block off whole schedules just because it really gums things up. So typically, Mr. Burton can fill in for Mr. Duke can fill in for Mr. Burton, and we don't have this issue.
Yes, sir.
In your case, we've got an issue. So would it be all right if we wait for Mr. Duke rather, because it puts Mr. Burton in an awkward spot. He's representing somebody else that's involved in your case, and I think it's a relative, isn't it?
That's his son.
Your son?
Yes, sir.
So if you're all right with that, then what we'll do is we'll schedule this out a couple of weeks, and then we'll come back and we'll just kind of figure out where we're going from here.
Okay.
So let's give a date, Teresa, on the, not next week, but the week after at a 1 o'clock time slot.
Yes, sir.
Would it make sense to have Mr. Maxey here, or would it make sense to have Mr. Maxey appear by Zoom?
I
Don't
don't,
matter.
I think it would work either way, Your
I'd be up
Honor. The
north,
main
right.
thing is I've had further negotiations with Mr. Duke that Mr. Duke needs to speak with Mr. Maxey
Got
about
it.
before that hearing.
You're gonna be up north, you said.
Yeah.
Do you have access to a phone or
Yes, sir.
someplace to do it? So by Zoom would be best.
Yes, sir.
So what we're gonna do, Teresa, can we put this down? Was it the 2nd or the 3rd? Or the 27th? I don't know. I'm guessing dates now. It's been a long.
We have quite a bit on the 27th. If you want me to add another one, I can do that.
Your Honor, one more week might be better because I'm gonna
Let's
be
go
in
to-
trial and I'd like to be here.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do the next week. Mr. Maxey's out on bond, and I think that we can push it out a little bit.
We can do August 3rd at 1 o'clock.
So August 3rd at 1 o'clock, you can zoom in, sir. Why don't you, before you leave though, if you go over to the criminal window, pick up your paper, that'll give you the Zoom information.
I already have it.
It'll remind you of the date too.
Okay.
Okay,
Will
so
they be sending me a room number or the same room I was in before?
Yeah, same one, but we'll give you a reminder that we got a piece of paper saying the date and time. So just swing back over to the criminal window. They'll print it off for you, and then you're free to go. All right, thank you. We'll be adjourned.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Is that it for this afternoon?
That is
Teresa?
it. That should be
Okay.
it.
All right, I'm going to turn off the computer then.